and welcome to the Bossed Up Podcast, episode 466. I'm your host, Emily Aries, the founder and CEO of Bossed Up. And today, I want to give some long overdue attention to my Gen X listeners. As a millennial, I feel like I've talked a lot about my generation. I mean, millennials just in general have gotten a lot of press over the last decade. I feel like baby boomers get their due too. They get a lot of ink spilled about them. So does Gen Z on their way into the workforce now. But for whatever reason, maybe due to the fact that they're a smaller generation overall, Gen Xers have been overlooked in a lot of career conversations. And so that's not fair. And we want to rectify that today. So today I'm excited to be joined by Vince Chan, who calls herself a financial wizard by training and a human capitalist at heart. She's at 51, embarking on her 18th career change by diving into podcasting with the mission to achieve career equity for all. She's the executive producer and host of Chief Change Officer, a top-ranked global podcast dedicated to the art and science of career change for progressive minds. Since its launch in 2024, the podcast has amassed over 400,000 downloads and achieved top career podcast rankings in strategic markets, including number 1 in the US, Canada, and Ireland. And as a Gen Xer herself, whose partner is also a Gen Xer, Vince speaks quite a lot about the research and realities, her lived experience of being a Gen X career changer who's navigated a lot of transformation over the course of her career. From the very early age of 15, when she first outlined her career plan, Vince has navigated the high-stakes world of billion-dollar investment markets. Prior to focusing on human capital, she spent over 15 years at top-tier global institutions, including the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Goldman Sachs, S&P Global Ratings, Deloitte, PwC, and TCW Asset Management. Her expertise spans finance, strategy, and entrepreneurship, supported by the U.S. CPA and CFA credentials. So she has a finance background. She also holds the unique distinction of earning MBAs from both the Yale School of Management and Chicago Booth, the only individual in the history of both schools to do so. So Vince has her credentials lined up with a background in solid finance and business strategy. And she's a 2-time published author of career guides in China and is a recognized speaker at major global conferences like the Web Summit and South by Southwest, where she shared her extensive knowledge about the future of work, which we touch on in today's episode. Now Vince is launching the C Room, a multi-generational career enablement firm that focuses on assisting Gen X finance professionals at critical career crossroads. Overshadowed by baby boomers and Gen Y, Gen X faces challenges that traditional career coaching, mainly around interview skills and resume crafting, doesn't necessarily address. So the C Room, designed to free Gen X professionals from career stagnation, reignite their motivation, and maximize their strengths from Wall Street to Main Street. Vince, welcome to the Bossed Up Podcast.
Well, thank you for invitation, Emily. I'm really, really excited to be here today.
Today, I want to talk about career transition for Gen X because I think Gen X doesn't get a lot of press, right? Gen X doesn't always get a lot of attention compared to boomers and millennials and even Gen Zers entering the workplace now, who I feel like have a lot of representation in public media about their generation. So when we're thinking about Gen X in particular, and to be clear, your story transcends your generation, but also your like global experience as a high achiever, as a child who's transitioned from China to the US and back. And, you've done so much as a high achiever with that sort of immigrant child pressure feeling, right? That I think a lot of first generation college students can relate to. And so there's so much to your story beyond your Gen X status that informs how you've approached your career. But for my Gen Xers who are listening along here, what is the Gen X generation characterized by?
Basically, between age 44 to 59, then you're Gen X. I'm 51, so I'm in the middle of the Gen X generation. You're right. We are so much under the radar. I checked the internet, if you look at Google, I think the result is, I don't know how many, but compared to Gen Y, which is millennial, or Gen Z, the number of results like much lower. Partly, some people argue that because the size of our population is small on a relative basis to boomers as well as Y. That's why, all the marketing effort, all the, when I talk about like retail, like about commerce, like it's all about, oh, baby boomers, they spend Gen Y, they spend, which is millennial, or Gen X, they're just hardworking people, they work. I think Gen X in today's job market in particular, they face certain constraints. And these constraints, some of those are externally imposed, some are internally imposed. And I would argue that any Gen X who is now listening to this episode, if you really want to control your situation better, your career prospect, your career change, or to fulfill your own potential more, I would argue that you deal with the internal imposed constraint more. I'll explain what that means. External constraint, we are called sandwich class, meaning that we got squeezed. We got squeezed by baby boomers, we got squeezed by millennials. When I say squeeze, I mean in terms of, again, support, products, any kind of products, not just coaching products when it comes to or HR or anything. I mean like all kind of things. But we're squeezed also on another level. Think about it, 44, 59, what does that mean? If you are married, you have kids, your kids are not, most likely they're not coming of age yet. They're still maybe in, you still need to support them financially and take care of themselves, take care of those kids. And then your parents, most likely baby boomers or maybe so-called silent generation, the generation before baby boomers, may have health issues. They may be okay, or maybe they got other things. So you may also get your own health issue. Think about it. 44, 59. So you got the family factors, you got two generation on both ends to squeeze you. You got work issue because now we got AI, we got a economy that is not very stable, we got layoff. Some of the Gen X may got laid off as well. So we got financial issue. We're not sure about, we have enough money to retire. So we retire in the formal sense. And I would argue that retirement would take many different forms going forward. So all in all, on work, on health, on financial and family fronts, we are squeezed. That's the external constraint that I argue that harder for us to change. We can kind of manage our health, but a lot of things we can change, right?
Yeah, and career change after 40 is hard in general, right? Like, we're talking about people who have well-established careers at this point. They're juggling that sandwich generation of caretaking from children and parents. And so those are very real constraints that keep people from transitioning, right? What are some of the internal constraints you see?
I call them psychology and mindset. And that's related to how we were brought up. We were brought up by our parents and peers and teachers. And who are these parents and teachers? They're most likely baby boomers or even older than baby boomers. And those people, they've experienced the Second World War. They've experienced like really, really bad situation when, of course, they have certain ethical standards, there are certain concepts in their mind. They are all about, they could be a silent generation. There's a lot of those concepts that kind of pass along to us.
Is that like related to the Gen X loyalty thing? Because I was just texting with a former client of mine and a friend of mine before this interview, knowing that she's a Gen Xer who's been thinking about or just playing around with the idea of making a career transition, but she feels so disloyal to her employer, who she's been with for 15 years, Like, is that related, do you think, to how they were brought up?
I haven't thought of this word disloyal, but I have another word for it. I think Gen X face a lot of fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of age disclosure, fear of inadequacy, fear of falling behind, fear of background based identities, fear of appearance, fear of social comparison, and fear of loneliness. Now, you may argue that, well, Vince, some of those fears, I think we all have those fears. Sure, absolutely. We're humans. Of course, we have fears. But I found that a lot of these fears in Gen X, they are more pronounced. For example, fear of judgment. Your friend, of course, your client, I don't know all the things. So she used the word loyalty. I like to, if I know about her situation more, I think it could be related to fear of judgment. Is that because again the peer group, we are more attached to peer group. We are more attached to again a standard playbook. In my case, for example, I went to Yale for MBA. 20 years ago, I graduated in 2002. So today, 20 years later, all my friends, some of those, seriously, they're famous people in their own space. They got really big title. And I mean, me being like having my podcast, honestly, in their eyes, I'm not successful at all.
It's very millennial of you.
Yeah.
See, a millennial like me, it's like such a bragging point to have your own thing, right? Because millennials were taught that like your passion should be your purpose, should be what's yielding your paycheck. And like to go pursue your dreams and hustle hard and start your own thing. That's very millennial success factor, but not so much for Gen X. I think it's like Gen X values institutions still in a way that millennials don't, right?
Well, relatively speaking, yes, you're right. Yes, we are taught to what is the perfect job for you. You join again. I can say not Google. I think when I was in Yale, I used Google. I mean, as a user, Google wasn't as big as now, so they did not recruit MBAs in my school. But in my days, the big institution, they're Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, McKinsey, BCG, they're all consulting firms, banks. They're still here, by the way. These are still big firms. Don't get me wrong, they're big firms. A lot of people still like to work for them. But we are so attached to those brand names, to institution. Oh, if one day I become the managing director of JP Morgan, that's the peak of my career. Yes, for sure, absolutely. You got a seven-figure paycheck. That's, of course, everybody want to get a seven-figure paycheck. But yes, but because if you have a seven-figure paycheck, and let's say you got laid off, right? And then you say, okay, I got some savings, I can take my time. Sure, take your time. Maybe you have a family, maybe you're not married, doesn't matter. And then you start thinking about, oh, what's my next career direction? Do I still stay in banking or do something else, or maybe write a book? You have a lot of options. And I bet for sure for myself, but also for a lot of my friends, they most likely would not be as bold as me to just try something different, just like not getting a corporate job again, and even invest my own money to create this and this, to write a book, to spend money, getting things done without seeing, oh, are you going to earn 10 times from this or 100 times from this? Have you done the calculation, Vince? you know and Gen X tend to have this fear of judgment. So, what if my friends think of me this way? What if people see you this way? And I found that in humans, in our lives, honestly, at the end of the day, if you care so much about how people see you, you don't love yourself enough. And I found Gen X, they don't realize that they don't love themselves enough. They just care so much about others in a good way and bad way. And that put a lot of stress on.
Well, I wonder, like, how would you advise a Gen Xer to approach a career transition knowing that they are kind of conditioned to be caretakers for both if they have children, children who are nearing empty nest status, right? They're getting pretty up there at this point in their 40s. So hopefully their children are going to fly the coop eventually. But caring for elders, right? Caring for family members is like a big part of their lives right now. And they're watching their retirement funds. They're looking at their pensions if they're lucky enough to have one. They're looking at those numbers and saying, holy if I don't like put the pedal to the metal, I don't have that much time left in the workforce when it comes to peak earning years. So if Gen Xers are feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to get ready for retirement, do I have enough? And they're anxious about that. Why would anyone benefit from making a career transition at that stage? I think that's the opportunity cost that we fail to look at sometimes. And I'm wondering, that my Gen X friend I was talking to said, I look at my millennial counterparts who hop from job to job to every 2 to 5 years, and they get big salary increases for doing so. And I just wonder, am I missing out, or am I being loyal by staying here? And what's the safer path?
Yeah. Interesting when you mentioned 2 to 5. That's actually like more than 10 years ago. I told my friends that don't stay in a firm longer than 5. But I think in today's world, 2024, I would say you'll be lucky to stay in a firm more than, for 5 years. I think today the number is getting smaller and smaller. Back to your question, I think there are different things that Gen X can do. One thing is they come to talk to me, then I can offer them a good rate, good consulting rate. This is a little controversial here. But, joke aside, there are a couple of things, some to do with their mindset, with their attitude, some to do with, of course, the action. Let me talk a bit about the attitude. Now, retirement. I know all along, my generation for sure, but all along, even nowadays, we always think of retirement is we reach a certain age, maybe 60, 65. Then we have savings to allow us to travel around the world, maybe on a cruise or something. We always got those scenes in our mind about how retirement may work. I guess for older generation, maybe they got grandkids and children, etc. But I think the retirement, this concept of retirement, I think retirement still will still be around this concept, but the form and shapes of retirement would change. Like everything else in our digital era, everything else got redefined. So in the past, you got a Yale degree because and then because you go to the school, but now you can get some kind of Yale education through Coursera, for example. So there's a lot of things we need to redefine. The retirement, when I think of the retirement, the concept is don't be bound by the standard playbook. Oh, we have to be able to have ABC in order to call it a happy retirement. Well, a happy retirement, it could be DEF, it could be XYZ. It doesn't have to be ABC. First of all, about the concept of retirement, like what constitute a happy retirement for you.
Does that include work, you think? Like income?
Yes, I think work in the past is we work, we save enough, and then we maybe invest, we have property, and then yes, we can retire. Yes, you're right. I will argue that, and for sure myself, I don't see myself honestly, so to speak, not working after a certain age as long as I'm healthy, healthy, mental, physical. But you will see me keep working and working until the day. I'm honest. If you will keep in touch, and then you see, oh, Vince, this new book coming out. Oh, Vince, I talked to her 10 years ago. Don't be surprised to see me like this.
I mean, I do think having a purpose, and I was just talking with someone on the recent episode here about longevity and health and social prescriptions in the UK. And she was saying, like, giving people a purpose, a sense of purposefulness, if that's the word, to really continue working is a way to continue engaging in the world. And it's so Gen X of you, as like incredibly hardworking people who still believe in our institutions and want to contribute, to be like, I'm going to work forever. And in fact, we have another guest on the podcast from a few years ago now, Tanya Hester. She and I talked about FIRE movement, the financial independence and retirement early. And her whole book is about work optional, getting to this point where work is optional, but that doesn't mean you don't continue to work. Right. And so retirement, I think as a concept, you're right, is starting to really look differently.
Yes. Now, retirement, that's the concept. And then, figure out again your own definition of happy retirement. I think you define what happy retirement means for you, specific to a situation. You don't have to be on a cruise, although I see a lot of retired people, they travel on a cruise, they really enjoy their life, good for them. But again, you don't have to be like that. And second of all, I think Gen X, when it comes to career change or transitions, and now we're entering the AI era. And a lot of people, I'm sure it's not just Gen X. I'm sure even Gen Y, which is you, millennials or Gen Z, a lot of humans are concerned about what would happen with the job, what would happen with the world of work. I think Gen X, while I say they are hard worker, they attach the standard playbook, there's certain good things about Gen X. Think about it. Gen X, I would say, is the most versatile generation that that transcends across analog world and the digital world. When I was in my primary school, I used pencil and paper to do math. Then when I was in a senior high, I was allowed to use calculator. That's 80s. That's when, Lotus 123, which basically is the predecessor of Excel, came into this world and all that. And then in my 90s, when I was in college, I used computer, I used PC, I used Microsoft software to do my paper and all that. And then when I was in Yale, I used Google, I used emails, I used internet, I used a lot of things. I didn't even have LinkedIn when I do networking, and now we have like LinkedIn, a lot of things. So what I'm saying is, I think Gen X is most versatile when it comes to navigating and adapting to different literation of digital era. So I think Gen X, they're hard worker, but I would say they undervalue themselves. They undersell themselves in terms of, oh, maybe I'm not tech savvy. I haven't grown up in a tech savvy world. No, 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 no. You actually know exactly how sort of math is being done. You know how to figure things out when like you did not have any help. And now we're in a world that we got this supercomputer. We don't even see the size of it, but it's the whole world that does all kind of computations so quickly in front of us. Yet we adapt, we learn. So I would say for Gen X, one thing is don't undersell yourself. You are really versatile. Think about your transformation from analog to digital and several iteration of digital world. So now we're entering AI. What does it mean? Well, of course, you need to keep learning. Everyone has to keep learning about the latest technology, use it, try it. You don't have to create it, but you need to understand how to use the tools. But at the same time, the human qualities of use, something that we all developed when the world was much less digital. The human connection, how to build relationship, human to human interaction, and a lot of honestly business. What business is doing? Business is about building relationship. And whether we're in AI world, we're in whatever quantum computer, at some point we have a new word for the latest technology. But when it comes to business, when it comes to building career, when it comes to adding value to your job, whatever job you're doing, it's all about human relationship. You need to negotiate a deal with your counterparts. You need to negotiate a deal with the lawyers, even though the lawyer may have a lot of AI tools in the back end. You have a lot of human interaction, stakeholder management. A lot of those skills, I must say, Gen X are very, very skilled in that because we grew up in that kind of world and then we transition in the digital world. Millennial and Gen Z, because you guys are so exposed, to a lot of things. Some of those skills, unfortunately, I would say, got lost or somewhat distorted. I think Gen X has a lot to offer when we're entering the AI world, how we can use AI and human as a partnership. Going forward, I read a lot of articles on about the AI technology. The people right now, it's not just about the AI, the chat GPT, it's about how to use AI to work better with humans. And a lot of business problems, a lot of situation in whatever firm you're in, whatever industry you're in, is about like, okay, what's the human problem? What's the human situation? Where we can apply AI, where we must still use some human. I think Gen X, because they have a lot of experience with the real world situation, they have a lot of value to add in terms of, okay, I know where the problem is. I know exactly because I've tried it myself. Now we got this technology. And then we got people, we can work with them to create a human AI solution.
I wonder what you think of self advocacy among Gen Xers because I think both Gen X and millennials, like myself, have gone through a lot of transitions in terms of culture and work and the use of technology. So we're equipped to know that that's super valuable. But I think millennials were taught, especially millennial women, were taught early on that we have to negotiate more. We have to advocate for ourselves. We have to be flagrant, in some people's opinions, about how we ask for all that we're worth. And I feel like there was a lot of, people could call it hubris or say that we felt entitled, but also in defense of my generation, we got saddled with record numbers of student loans and, have to advocate for ourselves in order to make what our parents made, right? And we're still struggling to do that for the majority of my generation. But Gen Xers feel really different when it comes to talking about pay and salary And having the confidence in your value is one thing, but asking to be paid for it is another. Do you see Gen Xers withholding when it comes to negotiation and self advocacy in that way?
I would say yes. I think Gen X, you asked a very good question because again, the other day on social media, someone put out a survey about, oh, Gen X, should they be more outspoken, more vocal, or they prefer to be more silent? And it's not an official survey, so don't take it seriously. But in fact, I think over 70%, which is the longest bar, is like remain silent because Gen X wants to remain silent. I'm not those Gen X. I'm the outliner. I'm always the outliner anyway in my generation. And I even like I create my podcast. I say this podcast is for the progressive mind.
Well, you're coaching them. You know what I mean? You've got to bring them along, for the ride. So it makes sense that you'd be challenging your fellow Gen Xers in that way.
Yeah, yeah. I would say yes. I think Gen X again, once again, they're so attached to the standard playbook. And one another thing, I think millennials, when you guys are coming of age, first of all, you have the tool, you have the technology, you have the platform for you to express yourself. First of all, because in my generation, I told you when I was in Yale MBA, I did not have LinkedIn. So I have email, we had email, we have internet. But when we try to reach out to people, like sending them a cold email, introduce yourself, can we get an informational interview? In fact, I got my job by attending an industry conference. I talked to people face to face, like really thick skin.
Right. Meanwhile, millennials and Gen Zers are afraid to pick up the phone and like use it to call somebody.
Yeah, but I think you guys are more vocal in a sense because you got a platform. You can say whatever you want to say, although we know that some people they say things totally inappropriate with the ease of the technology. But anyway, so Gen X they attach to the playbook, and also in our generation, at least I would say up to certain years, we are so-called rewarded for being a good boy or good girl. It's like you know today we talk about like, oh, going to college is not good, when it comes to looking for career, because in the past, having a college degree, having a master degree, you have access to certain type of job that pays you well. You got to return to your so-called investment. And then we come to this stage where, oh, degree, I wouldn't say degree in general. I think certain degree have less value than others. I still think education is still important. I personally think, still very important. We should educate. We should get education, proper education. We keep learning, etc. But in my generation, what Gen X is so attached to standard playbook. Why they still want to attach to certain institution? Because in their life experience up to certain point, when they did certain things, they fulfill certain requirements, they finished the college, or maybe they got an MBA, they got certain education, and then they got a fairly good job. They stay in their job, they got paid really well. They see, oh, this is a comfort zone. It's so comfortable. Why am I leaving it and taking the risk? Whereas I would argue for millennials or even Gen Z, because the economy, the economic structure is so much different. You get a degree, you may not get certain type of job that pays you well, and then you try different things. You're being creative, which is good. But at the same time, because you found that, oh, no, that's not my experience. Even I got a degree, I got a Ivy League degree, doesn't mean anything to me anymore when it comes to work and all that. Why we need that and all that. So that's why we see a lot of those conversation, and it gradually, now we got AI. But anyway, I know we can save it for another episode.
We should. I mean, there's a lot to say about AI, but I feel like you've shared so much already. And as a Gen Wire, a millennial myself, I just wonder how much of our generational differences are due to the like astronomical increase in cost around education, which I think is only comparable to the astronomical increase in costs around childcare now that my generation is starting to experience firsthand as well. So it's just, the economics of it all. It's funny given your background, but the economics really influence the generational characteristics and what's happening in terms of career choices as a result. So I want to leave us with one sort of final question and then an opportunity for you to share more about your work and how folks can team up with you on this. But what's the first piece of advice you would give a Gen Xer, given everything you've already shared today, who's thinking about a career transition for the good of her family, for the good of herself, for the good of her earnings, what's one piece of advice you would want her to have?
Love yourself more. Be selfish. We are taught not to be selfish. We're taught not to be self centered. We're taught not to be a narcissist. I'm not asking you to be just focus on yourself, ignoring everyone around you, ignore your family members. Just like today, I'm not happy. Tomorrow, I quit my job. Not that kind of selfish. When I say love yourself more, because again, I found it a lot of times, and for sure in my own personal experience, I guess when it comes to job, when it comes to work, when it comes to choices, making choices, when it comes to thinking of my future, when I think of what I want to do now, do I go for an MBA? Or even if you ask me, what would I study? If I got a chance to change my career, I wouldn't go for an MBA. Not that that wasn't a good experience. That was a very, very good experience. But then I would have to explore more of my personal interest before I make that decision back then. A lot of people around you, even in good faith, your friends, your family, oh, hey, Emily, you shouldn't change your job. This job is XYZ. Oh, you should change this job. Look at this at XYZ. They probably analyze a lot of things for you in good faith. I'm talking about like those people who are in good faith. And of course, there's some people who are just nosy. They're not in good faith. Ignore them. But even if you are surrounded by really supportive people and they all ask you to take that job, this is like blah, 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 whatever. At the end of the day, ask yourself, okay, if you do this, how would you feel? What would you face? I'm having this podcast is about career change. It's called Chief Change Officer. So anyone would like to check out another podcast, Apple and Spotify, you can find me Chief Change Officer. The idea is we can all be master. We can all be CEO of our life. That's why everybody can be Chief Change Officer. It goes beyond your organizational title. It goes beyond your institutional label. And I interview a lot of my friends and even friends from different culture and different age group to talk about the change they have gone through and how they view change at work in their life. I hope from those stories people can find inspiration. And also you could follow me, of course, on LinkedIn. My handle is the Vince Chan, not any Vince Chan, it's the Vince Chan. Yeah, podcaster is my 18th career change. Haven't done it before myself, yet I started 3 months ago, and so far it's been a good experience. I don't fear any judgment from anybody, even people laugh or all that. I don't care. Every single time, I just keep doing a good job and keep working hard. I think that's the working hard, working smart, and also, again, love myself. Part of my logical decision, I think of all the business ideas, how I can make money out of all these ideas. That's logical. But at the same time, love, meaning the love for myself. This really something that can motivate me to get up every morning. I'll feel happy, I'll feel fulfilled. And then I can also help people and I can see their change, their positive change.
Well, Vince, I'm so impressed with everything that you're doing, and I so appreciate you taking the time to share so much of your wisdom and so many of your gifts with our listeners here today. I really have enjoyed this conversation. For links to everything that Vince and I just discussed, head to bossedup.org/episode 466. That's bossedup.org/episode 466. There you'll find a fully written out blog post that's easy to share, as well as a corresponding transcript for the full conversation in writing. I want to hear from you, Gen X. I want to hear from my Gen X listeners. I know you're out there. What did you make of today's interview? What else is there for us to unpack when it comes to the constraints, either real or imaginary perceived constraints, which we all have, but that seem to affect Gen X in particular when it comes to navigating career change, especially after 44, right? That can be a hard thing to do in general. So I definitely recommend checking out some of the related episodes I mentioned that are in today's show notes, including navigating a career change after 40, and some of the conversations that we've had on the podcast recently around the rising cost of care, childcare, and elder care included. And let's keep the conversation going, as always, in the Bossed Up Courage community on Facebook and in the Bossed Up LinkedIn group. Until next time, I can't wait to keep bossing with you in pursuit of our purpose. And together, let's lift as we climb.